Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and these are my friends Paige and Sarah, and today we are here to review the book Holes. Ladies, when did you first read this book?
A couple days ago.
4th grade. So pretty much 15 years ago.
And have you read it since?
I just reread it for this.
So the first time I read this book, it was actually read to me in the 8th grade, so either 99 or 2000. And something I didn't tell you is I did not reread it for this video. I remember what happens. We just watched the movie, which you guys can see a whole PNS Watch series on their channel.
100% this video is going to have spoilers for both the Holes the book and Holes the movie.
This book is about Stanley Yelnats IV, who is obviously the fourth in line of Stanley Yelnatses, which is also a palindrome, which was my favorite part of the book, let's be honest, because nerd.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
No. So Stanley Yelnats is walking down the street one day and a pair of sneakers lands on his head and he goes, "Hey, sneakers," and he brings them home. Unfortunately, those were stolen sneakers and he ends up at this weird juvie camp in the middle of the desert where he is meant to dig holes.
It's 100% juvenile detention. It's not really sugar-coated in any way. It's called a camp, but it's 100% prison.
This book goes places that not a lot of other kids books do, especially when it comes to criminal justice, and that's one of the things that I've really always liked about it. Even if I wasn't able to put it in such complex terms as a child.
Yeah.
It's a huge scam, which I had not even put it in those terms until last night, but it is a huge scam.
What's interesting about that is that we very much have for-profit prisons. This system is so pervasive and is so lucrative to the people that own these for-profit prisons that it is very likely that if you live in America, you probably own products that were made by prisoners who are making about 3 cents an hour.
Yeah, this book is literally 20 years old and it is still super relevant.
It kind of surprises me how old that book is, just because nothing has changed.
While he's at this camp, he meets a bunch of other people that are also at the camp for basically the same reason, obviously different crimes, but they're there also digging holes for the creepy people that are making them do this. It's just seen as these are character building exercises. One of the things that we were happy when we watched the adaptation into the movie is that they kept the races that were reflected in the book.
The leader of the group that Stanley is with is this black kid, X-Ray. Armpit is canonically black. Magnet is canonically Latinx. Zero is canonically biracial. The 2 white guys that are canonically white in the book, in their group specifically, are the 2 canonically white characters.
Yeah, the film adaptation is a really good example of how, in certain circumstances, race in your story can matter to the actual story. I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, it doesn't matter if this character is race-bent, so we should just make them white.
The fact that this is entirely about the prison industrial complex.
The race is a very deliberate choice on the part of the author.
Yes.
And if they had lost that in the movie, it would have lost part of its poignancy.
Mm-hmm. Which is what happens when you let the author of the book actually write the screenplay for the movie.
I was impressed.
Louis Sachar knew what he was doing. So Sarah is the warden if Sarah had a zillion times more evil in her body.
Yeah.
Hit you.
I am very greedy. I like money.
You were just never abused to the point of being forced to dig holes with your granddaddy in the middle of the Texas desert.
But I mean, I do have many Alabama summer days of going and looking for arrowheads and places very much like Camp Green Lake. Not as abuse. It's a very southern grandparent thing to do, to take your grandchildren out to the middle of nowhere and just do manual labor. I really identified with that part. I would also just like to clarify that the warden is this weird mix, both in the book and in the movie, of I would 100% date her if she wasn't evil, and also, can I borrow your clothing? Because this is how I want to be perceived.
So Sarah is the warden. Who would Paige be then?
Stanley.
Yeah, actually.
You are a very truthful person, a very honest person.
That's me. I feel like I would do for Zero what Stanley did for Zero.
Alright, so we've got the warden, we've got Stanley. I'm almost afraid to ask, who would I be?
I feel like you're badass enough to be kissing Kate.
Oh, yeah. Of course I would be.
She is a school teacher. That's as close as you can get to a librarian in the movie or the
Exactly,
book.
because like the actual library had shovels. Yeah, I definitely played a really good Calamity Jane in my day. Is there anything we wanted to say about the characters besides like it me?
They're
I
all,
love them all.
yeah,
I
they're
care
all
about them a
so
lot.
compelling, all so well
I
written.
mean, X-Ray is certainly unlikable just because of the way he treats Stanley and the way he pushes the other boys around, but it's not in this very stereotypical way. It's
No,
not in
it's
a way...
totally self-preservation.
Yeah.
He
And it's-
needs to be on top because that's how he survives.
And it's very realistic. Like, it's not like Stephen King bully territory where
Yeah.
it's just like so ridiculous. Not that kids can't be like Stephen King bully ridiculous. Just, it's been done a lot. I mean, I have trouble disliking any of the children because they're kids. They've committed crimes, but I feel like there is quite a high bar to meet in order for like a child to be deserving of that kind of punishment.
Kids don't have any control about whether or not they fall under the poverty line. When they are under the poverty line and they can't do anything to change that situation, they do desperate things the way that any adult would.
Yeah, fundamentally I felt like every single one of the kids was like a good person that just happened to be in a crappy situation.
Magnet tried to steal a dog. Armpit very clearly like cares about his mom, and like at the end of the book he's like, I need you to write this letter to my mom, just let her know that I'm sorry for what I did. Louis Sachar just showing us that these are still human beings and children with parents.
And fundamentally good people that just need help.
Yeah. We haven't talked about Mr. Pendansky at all. Like, at all.
Nobody wants to talk about Mr. Pendansky.
But his character's fascinating.
He is fascinating.
He's fascinating because as a kid, I never picked up on the fact that, like, he does not care about them. He's doing this entirely for his own gain. He gets off on making sure that they respect him, but he refuses to respect them.
He's the embodiment of like that white missionary tourist. Look what I did for the last year. I worked with troubled kids at this prison camp, and I made a real impact on their lives.
And he's a damn fraud.
Yep.
He's not even a doctor.
He's very good at looking for that respect from them, but giving them absolutely no respect and actually detracting it, like calling Zero like less than nothing, and only referring to the boys as their given names and not the names they've given themselves while they're at camp.
I don't think he makes fun of Zero and calls Zero out in front of the other boys as a deliberate like manipulation tactic. I think that a lot of people who act like that around children are not necessarily doing it because it's a conscious choice. I think that kind of conceit and desire to feel superior to children especially is something that can be so deeply ingrained inside of you that it's not even something that you make the conscious choice to do. I think he's just an adult man who feels better when he degrades children.
Yeah, and if you pick on the weakest one, then the ones up the food chain will see that and identify with you better. It's this weird thing I've seen play out in schools.
This book was really good in portraying all those different kinds of people and showing adults in ways that we don't generally see them portrayed. I mean, like, we've been joking that, like, the warden was super evil and cunning and everything, and I mean, to an extent, greed has poisoned her mind. Like, to the detriment of these children, to the point where, like, she doesn't care if Stanley and Zero die. But also, it's very easy to see how all these adults act like this and act the way that they do. It's not just that they've been corrupted by evil. It's that they're very real people motivated by very real human emotion.
No, they're not portrayed as, like, evil for evil's sake. They're portrayed as complex human beings.
Yeah.
Who over time have been corroded into these horrible people.
Like shadows of people. Ever since I read this as a kid, I've always like seen the shadow of the warden because like you don't see her for a couple chapters in at least. She is a monstrous shadow before you see her the first time. Because all the boys know that she can see them.
Yeah, that's kind of part of her power because like as Stephen King said at some point, like it's way scarier if you have like that closet door open just slightly, just enough that your imagination can wonder what's going on in that closet than like having it completely closed or completely open.
The mystery of terror is what makes horror.
You know, we talked about all the boys, but we never mentioned Zero. Zero is so important to this story.
Zero is a very, very lovely boy and a very good example of this idea that because you are not formally educated, you cannot be smart.
He's been homeless his entire life.
Yeah, almost as long as he can remember.
Yeah, he has nowhere to go. And when he runs away because he is done being manipulated and used as a slave, he runs and he refuses to go back to the camp. There's nothing that they're going to do for him. It's only going to get worse for him if he goes back. And then the curse lifts, and Stanley says he's feeling lucky. And Zero trusts Stanley because Stanley treats him like a human being and is his friend. None of the other boys have done this for him. The very first line is, "There is no lake at Camp Green Lake." It's kind of an iconic line to me. And then
Yeah, it's a really good opening line. And it plays out through the entire book as well. It's not just a random thing that you're throwing at the audience because it sounds interesting. It actually plays into the whole family mythology and what's going on in the area. Good writing.
The book so effortlessly weaves in between these three different storylines.
Yes. So the three storylines are the main storyline, which follows Stanley at Camp Green Lake, and then there is the storyline about his no good, dirty, rotten, pig-stealing great-great-grandfather, Elya Yelnats, from Latvia.
And that tells the story of how Stanley's family specifically became cursed.
And then the third story is about Sam and Kissing Kate Barlow. I think that is actually like my favorite side story. It's my favorite story of the three, even though I love all three of them. I really just love Sam and love Kate. One of the things in the book that we don't really like miss it in the movie because the movie is just as dramatic. It's the part where Sam dies.
They try to leave together in the book.
They try to leave together. They were a little more than halfway across the lake when Miss Catherine heard the loud roar of the engine. Then she saw the ugly black smoke, and then it's just an ellipsis. So you don't actually see Sam die. And then there's like a white space, and it goes to, these are the facts. The Walker boat smashed into Sam's boat. Sam was shot and killed in the water. Catherine Barlow was rescued against her wishes. When they returned to the shore, she saw Mary Lou's body lying on the ground. The donkey had been shot in the head. That all happened 110 years ago. Since then, not one drop of rain has fallen on Green Lake. You make the decision. Whom did God punish? I like it shaky when I read that. That is probably one of my favorite passages from the book.
Yeah, it does its job really well.
Oh, yeah.
In just such very short amount of time.
Yeah.
It's a very powerful section.
Yeah. Yeah, so Sam is an onion farmer. He's canonically a black man.
And it's important to the story.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
because he's in a white Texas town.
These are not characters that you could race bend without losing some aspect of the story or without losing part of the message.
Especially because Sam and Kate fall in love, and it's a big deal. In the movie, they don't really talk about it, but in the book, for sure, they talk about how, like, when one of her students sees that they kiss, they stop coming to school. Their parents don't let them go to school anymore.
And that is the inciting factor in Trout, like, going after Sam,
Yeah.
because he's a black man.
You know, I almost wonder if the movie was a bit too close of an adaptation. There was not a lot that was changed at all.
There's the whole thing with Stanley not being fat. Stanley's fat in the book, where he's not in the movie. The only reason that I'm not, like, upset about it as a fat person is that they take out all of the big things that had to do with Stanley's weight, like being embarrassed at school. I appreciated it in the book for sure, but I wasn't like crying about it when it was missing from the movie.
Especially since you said, because it seemed like he was coming from a poor family and he had that little bit of like, he wasn't eating enough, emaciated look to him.
Because the Yelnatses are so poor.
Because of the family curse.
Yeah. Curse.
Something that I did kind of miss from the movie is that Elya and Madame Zeroni have this nice relationship in the book. He goes to her for advice because they're friends.
Yeah.
And because she's this wise woman, and she asks him to take her up the mountain because they're friends.
What matters to me about Elya is that he doesn't leave intentionally forgetting her. He just forgets because he's heartbroken. Because she suggested that he go to America because her son is in America.
And then he completely forgets.
He just forgets.
It's like, oops.
I can't remember exactly how it played out in the book because, again, I listened to a teacher read it to me like almost 20 years ago. But in the movie, when they're together on top of the mountain and they're surviving because they found all the onions, there's this really subtle transition where he stops calling him Zero. He calls him Hector. He calls him by his given name. And then from there on out, he never calls him Zero again.
If you're worried that because this is a children's book, it's going to be a sugar-coated version of the prison industrial complex, I wouldn't worry about that because it's very clear.
And I think that that's why this stuck with me so well and why I was like, well, I could reread it, but it's also fun just to spring on you guys that I didn't read it in the last 20 years. And I still remember it. And I'm glad that we filmed the movie first so that I could have a little bit of a refresher. That's it for this video. Like I said, we filmed a video of us watching all of the movie and giving our commentary on it, so be sure to check that out over on the Princess and the Scriveners channel. Let us know what you thought about the book down in the comments below. On the way down in the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I'll see you at some point. Bye!